One NFL insider says things may be progressing with Brock Purdy. Unfortunately, that same NFL insider says things are going poorly with one of the franchise's most beloved players. We break it all down on today's Gold Standard Podcast. Oh, it's good to be back. What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard Podcast. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera alongside Vish Kumar, and I'm fresh off vacation, Vish. I'm like a hose that was kinked. I have all these 49er takes that I've just been waiting to get out there, and now I'm back. We could spread out the hose, and they'll all just come flowing out of me.
That's quite the analogy, Rob. I didn't expect you to go quite there starting this show. I thought, you were in Chicago, you would be a different person. We wouldn't have such a bad analogy, but hey.
Nope. Same bad analogies, same bad analysis. That's what you get here on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Look, we got a lot to talk about. The draft is days away, which I can't freaking wait for that to get underway. Mike Silver just, lobbed a grenade on Twitter about the 49ers, which is where we're going to start today with Brock Purdy and George Kittle. John Lynch has his annual pre-draft press conference tomorrow. We can get into some of the questions that we want him to be asked, quite frankly, because I think that this Mike Silver stuff, leads to some questions, and we can talk about all of that. Let's start with what Mike Silver said. It all began with 3 Twitter posts. First one is on the screen. If you're watching the stream, he says the 49ers offseason program begins tomorrow. There's some uncertainty about whether players seeking new contracts, specifically Brock and Kittle and Warner, will show up for voluntary activities. There has been some progress toward an extension for Purdy that will likely pay him more than $50 million a year. The question is how much? If Purdy shows up on Tuesday, it's a sign that he and his agent believe they're very close to striking a deal. If he doesn't, that probably indicates that some significant obstacles remain as of now. No decision has been made. Let's start with that. We can get to the other stuff a little later, Vish. The fact that Silver is saying this, and then he says no decision about Brock has been made, that's got to be coming from Brock's side, don't you think?
Oh, 100%. That's Brock's side saying that if the 49ers are respectful, and I'm using respect as like an adjective, it's not really respect. It's what Brock and his side indicate a worthy first offer. And they feel like the negotiation is something that, hey, we just need to, iron out a few details, maybe, be between a few $1 million here and there. Then there's no reason for him to hold out this offseason or do anything drastic. He can just focus on the season and the business will take care of itself. But if it's a situation that some of the other 49ers stars have run into where they feel like they're about to come into the offseason or nearing this time and they start the first parts of their negotiation and they feel like there's a large difference between where they're at and the 49ers are at, it looks like Brock Purdy's action will be similar to that of other people who have missed the offseason. Unlike George Kittle, unlike Fred Warner, that of Deebo Samuel, that of Brandon Ayuk to miss the offseason, that of Nick Bosa to miss the offseason, and hopefully get his contract ironed out due to the pressure he puts on them from the quarterback not being there then.
I mean, if there is any sort of uncertainty with the contract, you got to believe Kyle Strong and Brock Purdy's agent has got to be telling him, Brock, don't go. Don't show up. Like, you're taking a huge arrow out of my quiver here, Brock, if you show up to voluntary activities while I'm trying to negotiate your deal and we're far apart, right? Because that's the whole thing. If Brock shows up through all of this, the 49ers have no urgency to get it done because everything is proceeding as scheduled, as planned, right? He's working out, the team's going there, install, everything's fine. The 49ers have no urgency to get a deal done. They can drag this thing out because, as many people have said, and people in the chat are saying now, Brock is under contract. It's only if he doesn't show up that things get dicey because he affects every other part of the offense. He affects the receivers. He affects the tight ends. He affects the running backs, all that stuff. That's when you really put the screws to the team. So I do kind of agree with Mike Silver that if he shows up, it's a very, very, very good sign.
I agree, and I think it's a step further, right? Because I compared it to Debo, I compared it to Brandon Ayuk, but frankly, I don't know that the 49ers were that bothered at the early parts of the offseason that Debo wasn't there, or Brandon Ayuk wasn't there, or Nick Bosa wasn't there. But I think they would be really bothered if Brock Purdy wasn't there, because I think it sets a really bad image for the kind of season that you're about to have. You know, when you're talking about an NFL organization, you talk owner, you talk general manager, you talk coach, and then you talk quarterback. There's
Mhm.
a different expectation for the quarterback to be at these mandatory offseason events and even the voluntary ones. It shows a sign of leadership. And usually, when the quarterback is not there, it's a big story. It shows a team that maybe feels a little disjointed going into the offseason. It's an Aaron Rodgers situation. And we know those aren't things of Brock Purdy's nature. So, as you said, it would indicate if he's not there, the negotiation is not going well. And if we're going to take that, the binary view is to say if he's there, then things are probably positive towards where he's going for a contract. But here's the second question to this. And Silver didn't really address this at all, but I'm asking you, if he's there, do you think it's a situation of maybe they're so far apart they both decide let's not worry about it and let's just go into this season? You go and play, and that's it.
It could be, but I don't think that Brock would do that. Listen, he had one career threatening injury already. He couldn't finish last year because his arm felt like it was on fire, the same surgically repaired arm. He was undergoing, very I don't know how I want to say this. He was undergoing, let's just say, some maintenance during the week on that arm through the year just to be able to play. I don't know that he's willing to say, I'll take on the risk and play it out again. I don't know that he would be willing to do that.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I don't know what if his hand is forced? What if the 49ers are like, this is what we're going to give you? It's a take it or leave it offer. And if you don't take it, we're not going to negotiate with you.
It could be. And Brock, I do. That's why I think that this whole situation may come down to whether or not Brock Purdy has the attitude of give me every last dollar, or you know what, Kyle Strong and my agent, forget the getting the last couple million. Just sign a deal. Let's just do it. I want to get in. I want to play. I'm not going to try and get every last dollar. It's more important to me to be there for my team and my teammates and all that stuff. I was a 7th round pick. This is still more money than I, could possibly spend in a lifetime, yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's what the 49ers are counting on. That's what Matt Barrows said a couple of weeks ago. It's essentially that the 49ers think when it's nut cutting time, Brock Purdy will say, enough, I want to be there. I'm not going to miss time.
So that's possible, but the way I see it, and the reason why I don't think it would come to that for Brock Purdy is I think the opposite. When it's nut cutting time, I think the 49ers are the ones that are going to fold. The 49ers have shown that they fold in these negotiations all the time, whether it's the owner because he cares about how the entire thing is being perceived and how the fans feel because the guy is not signed, whether it's the coach running up to get the guy signed. They really care about more than just whether they're going to sign the guy. And you know why I say that every single time? Because if you're going to sign the guy, it never gets to September because you usually know in April because that's when you're making the financial decisions on we're going to sign the guy. This is how we're making our projections and forecasting for the next 2 years. He's probably going to be under contract. His number is going to range anywhere between these two numbers. So therefore, we have to build a roster to be able to hold X amount of salary cap for this guy when his contract gets signed. Okay. So the fact that you make that decision then, but still hold your hand all the way out there and then see how it's going, and then in the last minute fold to, and acquiesce to everything the player asks, tells me that there's more to the negotiation for you than just the decision of signing the player. There's the, oh, how are the fans feeling about it? Oh, how is this feeling about it? And all of that. This is another one of those situations. At the end of the day, if I'm Brock Purdy, here's why I would sit out if the 49ers give me a bad offer at the beginning. Because if you're the 49ers, Jed York, I shouldn't say Kyle Shanahan, but Jed York and the York specifically, they won't be able to take the week of bad press. That, hey, look, the 49ers quarterback didn't show up for the offseason. Look at how disorganized the 49ers look. Look at how this, look at how that, look at this. Because here's the thing about them. They like to not be perceived as the Cowboys in public, right? They don't want that public image of dysfunction. But there is dysfunction if you follow this team time after time again, right? In each one of these negotiations, and this is one of those situations for me. If he sat out a week in the offseason and it's like, oh, the 49ers, they don't really know what they're doing. This looks kind of weird and all of that. They hate that situation. They hated it before the draft. That's why it was more important to clown the reporters about Mac Jones than actually get the quarterback right. It was more important to do that. And this is another one of those situations. And so for me, that's what it really is, Rob. And that's why the negotiation wouldn't go there. If I'm the 49ers, I feel like if I'm so specific about him needing a certain amount of money and the market is where it is and he's earned what he's earned, but I strongly feel like I can't go above 50 with him, that's what I do. But they won't do that. And when push comes to shove, even if they believe they shouldn't go above 50 for him, they will go above 50 because they would rather go above 50 for him than be the team that didn't go above 50 for him and have that look kind of funny for a year.
Mike Florio said it with me before my vacation, and I completely agree. I think that Kyle Shanahan masks a lot of dysfunction from the Yorks and from the York.
100%.
And I think, they blame Kyle for all these outrageous contracts. They've essentially said Kyle Shanahan is the reason they did get it done with Kittle and Trent Williams again and Debo and Bosa. Otherwise, the Yorks would have screwed it up and the player would have been gone. And I do think that Kyle masked that, and people don't want to admit that about Jet. He's not a good owner. He is not a good owner.
It's why you and I are willing to identify but forgive Kyle Shanahan's flaws, because to me, Jed York is no better than he was in 2016. He just got a guy to run this thing who is way smarter than the other guys he had running this thing. And every chance he's gotten, he screwed it up for the guy who's running this thing because he doesn't really know how to be an owner or how to be his boss. He's just, thankful that Kyle Shanahan is running this thing, and he's not the idiot who had the 32nd ranked offense and the 32nd ranked defense and fired 3 coaches in 3 years, was paying 3 coaches contracts, had no talent to speak of. That's who he was in 2017. He's not changed.
No, what significant event would have happened in his life that would have caused him to change? People always, he's matured. That doesn't just happen, okay? It happens because of significant life events. Sometimes it's the birth of a child. Sometimes it could be the death of a family member, something like that. That's what spurs change. It's not just, all of a sudden now we're 4 years removed from Jim Harbaugh and he's super smart. No, that's not how it happens. Valerie says I could see a Jordan Love type of hold in where Brock Purdy shows up for OTAs but won't take the field for practice or drills until he's extended. Maybe he tries to split.
That was going to be my next question.
Maybe he splits the baby, right? I'm not totally staying away. I'm showing up, but I'm not doing anything. And that could happen. And that's something, I guess. But, do
you see him doing that one?
Maybe. That seems more likely to me. It doesn't have to be this way. Again, the Eagles just got another contract done. Cam Jurgens signed with the Eagles. They re-signed him. They re-signed Saquon Barkley, and they got a contract done with their linebacker, Braun, I believe. The Eagles, right? The team that won the Super Bowl, that had the shortest offseason, that did all of that, right? That it should have all the excuses in the world to not have time to get these deals done because they were playing the longest, and then they had to go right into draft prep, and it's on a silver platter for them to be able to make those excuses. And instead they go check, check, check. They get all those deals done. Yet the 49ers somehow can't. It's a front office ownership issue, period. End of discussion. It doesn't have to be
that way. Well, that technically, right, they do get it done. And that the bigger problem is it lies in how they get it done. Because everybody wants to give them a cookie and be like, well, they always get it done at the end of the day. So does Jerry Jones, even though Ezekiel Elliott spent a month during training camp in Cabo. He got his contract. That's what people always want to say. But the thing is, like I said, the way these teams do business, they knew they were going to sign Brandon Ayuk in April, or they knew they were going to trade him in April. It's one of the two. There was nothing in April that changed between April and August. Did they sign him in August or September? August.
Whenever the hell it was.
Mid-August, I want to say. Mid-August. There was nothing that changed. And so either you bite the bullet and you go get the deal done, or you don't. But you can't just dibble-dabble and keep that decision kind of hanging and leave your entire organization and your team waiting on it. And then blame it after you said it wasn't an issue. Then blame it after the season.
And then blame the coach for ultimately paying more money than you wanted to pay. Again, it's the dysfunction is letting things linger this long. Let's get to more of Mike Silver's report. Number 3 from Silver. Fred Warner and the Niners have yet to have any substantive talks about a possible extension, but the veteran team leader is likely to report. Okay, good. Kittle, heading into the final year of his deal, is much more of a long shot as he and the 49ers remain far apart in discussions about a new deal. I can't help but wonder, Vish, if the 49ers are saying to Kittle, hey, George, we'd love to get a deal with you, but unless you play at this number, we can't possibly engage in discussions because we don't know what Brock's going to be. And we got to make room for Brock. And it's all on Brock. They keep putting Brock Purdy in a position to be blamed for every other roster decision this offseason. That's why they had to cut Leonard Floyd and they had to get rid of Malik Collins and they had to get rid of all these people. Well, because of Brock. It was Brock's deal. We had to make room for Brock's deal, which is still not done. So they're making Brock Purdy responsible for all of it. I'll say this, Vish. What do we know about the 49ers?
I don't think it's that for Kittle, to be honest.
What do you think it is?
So there's 2 ways to look at the Kittle thing, right? The first thing is the Kyle Juszczyk part of it. He's 2 years away from being on that goddamn wall. How are they going to get 2 years further on his contract, right? But then the second part of it is he's really expensive for a tight end, like really expensive for a tight end. And this is a tight end rich draft. And you have a high pick and you can draft a guy that people are projecting as a very good tight end in Tyler Warren. And he's got a very banged up body. You know his body is banged up because you know of the surgeries he's yet to have gotten on injuries that he's been playing through since he was early in his career. He's still a phenomenal player, but the guy is 32 years old at a position that guys usually don't necessarily age well with his style. The finesse guys who play over the middle of the field, playing, finding zone coverage, sitting down like Travis Kelce, Tony Gonzalez, these are the guys that age playing tight end. The Kittles, the grinders, the guys who play with a ton of physicality, hitting, usually the end of their career, their body really deteriorates. And so I wonder if the Kittle versus Warner thing is, the Warner thing is really easy to do. The guy is usually pretty healthy. A middle linebacker contract isn't usually so bad. They're used to giving that extension out. They've done it for Navarro Bowman. They've done it for Patrick Willis. So I get that one. The Kittle one, on the other hand, especially with where they are in the draft, I wonder if they're wait and see, Rob, to see what happens with Tyler Warren, to see what happens there before they have to shell out a considerable amount of money for a 32-year-old. Now, what problem do I have with this, Rob? Even this line of thinking, it would be valid if they didn't pay Kyle Juszczyk a month ago. Now that they paid Kyle Juszczyk, I don't want to hear anything because George Kittle, if that wall is so important, George Kittle better be on that goddamn 10-year wall.
No, you're not wrong, right? Like if you want to honor somebody, Kittle's the guy you honor. It's not Juszczyk. I want to say a couple of things. First, remember when the 49ers had uncertainty with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, but mostly Brandon Ayuk, what did? They drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. That was partly a hedge with Brandon Ayuk. I can't help but wonder. They're in negotiations with George Kittle. He wants more than they want to spend. The Niners are tightening the purse strings. I can't help but wonder if Parag is going to say, draft Ty Warren. Then if Kittle won't take our number, we'll trade him and we'll move on. And that'll be that. And we'll just, we'll move on. And then George Kittle can go play for somebody else. I can't help but wonder if we just saw them do it with Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall, Vish.
Rob, again, if the objective of this offseason was to get younger and cheaper, look, there's one guy in this roster that you would want to be the Joe Staley for a younger and cheaper roster. It's this guy. He's the ultimate leader. He's the unselfish professional. He was the first guy to make the All-Pro team when this team was bullshit, garbage, all of that. He was the first guy. And then he sacrificed and let Deebo Samuel be a star. And he sacrificed and let Christian McCaffrey be a star. And he sacrificed and let Brandon Ayuk be a star. And he blocked because you didn't want to pay a right tackle. And he has done all of that, okay? If you want to get younger and cheaper this offseason, you don't want to pay a 32-year-old tight end, top of the market, number one in the NFL, I got it. That logic, I'm for it. But you can't do it after you sentimentally wanted to keep a fullback, okay? A fullback who plays 45% of snaps, a fullback who you didn't draft, a fullback who you talked about for this 10-year wall after spending money on a position that's going to directly tie into the snaps of the fullback, okay? So once you do that, there's no excuse for not paying George Kittle. And I think that's where I'm at, Rob. If they went about this offseason when it was all about cost savings, it was all about getting younger. If you and Kittle are really far apart and you don't want to pay that money, it sucks. You got to say goodbye to people at some point. That's part of moving on in the NFL. But once you keep Juszczyk, I don't want to see one of these guys leave. I don't want to see it. I want them all on the wall. And then I want a full celebration in the offseason for all of them. 10-year wall.
I'd like to burn that wall to the ground, okay? I don't care about it, but they seem to keep talking about it. But in the weight of your roster decisions, right? It's like, should we bend over backwards for Kyle Juszczyk or George Kittle? Let me see. It shouldn't even be a question. And I will say this. If I was thinking about this purely from a team building standpoint, purely from a logic standpoint, purely from a just given the history of the NFL standpoint, how these guys age, the smart decision is not to extend George Kittle. I want to say that. It is. If you just look at it that way.
Right.
I also want to say I want them to make the bad decision. I want them to keep George Kittle. I want George Kittle to be a 49er forever, for life, one team. I get it, man. I get that it's not the smartest decision. I don't care. I want them to make a bad decision. Sentimentality is winning out with me, okay? There's a reason Kittle's jersey is up on my wall. I love watching him play. From what you said, too, about he was sort of like the vanguard of this renaissance in 49ers history. All of it. I want them to do it. And, if you're rational on all these guys, you're never going to keep anybody. And it's just going to be a swapping of laundry essentially forever. And some guys mean more to a team. And I think Kittle is one of those guys.
And I think it's more than that, Rob. Like, I think when you see an ushering of a great era, right, you see a lot of great players play in one area. When it starts to go away and things start to get a little bit worse, you start to see the guys who are truly the great players because their production doesn't slip even when the great team starts to change a little bit, right? And for like the Debos, for the Brandon Ayuks, even to an extent, they're great players, but even their greatness was circumstantial to the surroundings of the offense, how they were used within it, all of those things. Kittle is one of the exceptions to that. And that's where I agree with you too. Conventionally, I love getting rid of a 32-year-old tight end. I'm licking my lips at it. I love it. Let's get rid of it. I'm like the most ageist person when it comes to NFL rosters. I love the idea of getting rid of these older veteran players, but he's an exception to that rule. He's an exception based on how he's been performing in the latter half of his career, his technical proficiency in how his game has evolved throughout his career, how much better he's gotten at the individual details of playing the position, the different roles he plays, the leadership he's shown. He is the rare exception. He's the guy you keep. Like Philadelphia had an example of this, right? So many great pass rushers come through, all of that, but they were all great playing next to who? Two people, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. And now they've recreated that because they've gotten Jalen Carter. And a lot of great players are going to come through and play next to Jalen Carter. Similarly, that great player on the offensive line, they had Kelsey and Lane Johnson, a lot of great players, but those were the two. For the 49ers, this was that great player. This is the player that you surround, and everybody gets better by playing around this guy. I don't even think of him as an exception to this rule because George Kittle is an exception as a player. So therefore, you can't treat him the way you would treat other 32-year-old tight ends. And I think the last couple years of his career, how phenomenal he has been the biggest indication of that.
I completely agree with everything you just said. 100%. Like no notes, as they say. I can't help but wonder is it possible that Kittle is maybe saying, hey, let me see what you do with Brock Purdy, and then I'll decide if I want to stick around, right? What if things are not going good with Brock Purdy? What if George is like, I don't want to be around here? Same with Trent Williams and his retirement decision. Like maybe Purdy is like the linchpin, right? And it's like, hey, if they're not re-signing this guy that truly is a teardown, and George Kittle's like, I'm too damn old for that. Trent Williams is like, I'm too damn old for that. And so maybe there's like this kind of wait and see what happens with the quarterback because George doesn't want to have to play with Mac Jones.
But that's where if I'm the 49ers, I can't do that anymore because we gave them last year. Last year, they should have. I said it the whole offseason. that they should have been tearing it down last year. They wanted to give these guys one more year the same way they tried to do it in 2020. And the same way in 2020, last year, they all got hurt on that one more year. It doesn't mean that you listen to them again and now try and run it back. And we've done this 6 out of our last 8 shows, Rob, but like the only problem with this is bringing the fullback back. It's the biggest, like, it doesn't make sense in this plan of reloading. But at this point, I'm telling Kittle, I'm telling Trent Williams, hey, look, it's a business. I'm sorry. We put in last year. We weren't supposed to do it last year, but we tried one more time, went all in. We went Malik Collins. We went all of these different routes to try and get it back, and it just wasn't good enough. We've got to rebuild it. And you can be part of this rebuild. And if you're a part of this rebuild, we could be really good. We won't even be bad ever in this rebuild. Our first year in this rebuild could be 10-7.
Right.
But I think it's time to put your foot down. The problem is, again, what statement are you saying? Because there's no theme when you bring a 30, how old is he? 33, 34-year-old fullback?
Yeah, I agree that sort of, it throws a wrench into everything because that's the one move that there really is no logical. It just doesn't fit. Benali mentions the
10-year wall, man.
Matt Mayoko talked about this too in an interview. He basically pointed out that, like, look, the 49ers wait on all these guys and the market goes up and then they don't want to pay the new increased prices for the market. A la Trey McBride, right? Just set the market. $19 million for a tight end. Guess what George Kittle's going to want? $20 million. And the Niners are probably saying, we're not paying $20 million a year for a 31-year-old tight end. A 31-year-old.
I don't even know if he wants 20, but I don't think he wants to be 5 under Trey McBride.
He's not going under Trey McBride. That's for damn sure. He's not.
But I could see it as, hey, close the distance. Get me to 20 or get me to 19 and be even. But right now he's at 14. Trey McBride's at 19.
Yeah,
it's a huge difference.
I don't even think he wants even. I think he wants more. I'm the best damn tight end in the league. I just proved it last year. I had arguably my best season, or certainly one of my best seasons. But the 49ers, nope. Maybe they could have had Kittle for 19, right? Maybe. We don't know. I mean, it would have been the most for any tight end in the history of football. They could have thrown it out there to him. But no, we wait. We wait because we have to win the deal. We have to win because what if we get him for 18.5? Oh, then we win the deal. Now there's no stopping us. Except they never win the damn deals. And now they tick the player off. They don't want to pay the new market price. And so this is where we are. So now George Kittle might not show up for voluntary workouts for no reason at all. And the 49ers are cheap as hell. Anyway, the Warner thing, he's got 2 years left on his deal. So that's a little different. Like, that would be the one I'd be willing to wait on because, like you said, he's always healthy. He's a good dude. They never had any problem. They've already got one contract done with him that was like, of their superstar guys, the Warner deal was the least acrimonious, was the least.
Why, Rob? It's not a premium position.
Right. Well, yeah, but it's still not. So, I would
and that's why it'll be the one extension that you won't be, it won't even be an issue. In fact, he might get it done. You won't even know that they've been negotiating and it might just come out. Fred Warner gets a 2-year extension for a good amount of money. 49ers love to have a player. It'll be great marketing. You know how they'll put it out. It's the easiest one to do. It's the only ones they do well. They don't pay premium positions. They hate paying that contract. Why? The guaranteed money is excessive.
Well, corner, I think, is a premium position. They got the Lenore deal done. That was pretty good.
Was that what you pay Jalen Rand? Was that Pat Surtain? Was that Derek Stingley right now?
No, it was not a top of the market.
Right? If he was coming like that, now we have a problem. But they're not going to draft a corner, okay? So they're never going to have to pay a corner like that because they're never going to draft one to pay like that, okay?
But those are the ones they should draft, Vish. You just don't re-sign them, right? You draft them. You get them for 4 or 5 years, depending on, first-year option, and then you trade them. You still don't have to pay him. That's why you should draft that guy, because you don't want to re-sign him to a second contract.
And it's a position that's hard to age in, right? Because your athletic prime is really your prime as a corner. How many good 30-year-old corners have you ever heard of?
Very few. Joe Tiz says you can pay $50 million a year for Brock or $10 million a year for Aaron Rodgers. I do Joe, thank you for bringing that up. That is exactly why Aaron Rodgers said that. I'll play for $10 million. You think that was
You
an
think he's
accident?
waiting on the Niners or the Vikings?
Absolutely.
Oh, it's the Niners.
I think he's throwing it out there. I think he would play for anybody that would want him because I think he wants to play and nobody really wants him right now.
You don't think Pittsburgh wants him?
No, I think if they wanted him, they would have got him. Now, maybe after the draft, if they don't get a quarterback they want in the draft, they go and revisit it. But I think Aaron Rodgers knew exactly what he was doing by saying, I'll play for $10 million. He was talking to Jed York and he was talking to Kyle Shanahan. And he's saying, hey, I'm better than Brock Purdy. Look at the way I throw the ball. Look at the years we had last year. You could have me for 10. You don't have to pay Brock Purdy $50 million a year, and you don't have to pay me $10 million a year for the next 5 years. I'm a cheaper, better option for you. What owner and coach don't like that? That's exactly why he said it.
So here's why I'm anti-Rodgers for any amount of money. It's actually a football thing. It's not even the other stuff, which, yeah, I think it's really easy to just be like, not even escape the pocket. He doesn't want to get hit anymore. Like, to me, that's the number one going sign for a quarterback. And for all the things about Brady, he never lost that of being able to still stand and fearlessly throw it down the field. He lost it a little bit more than he had, right? But he never like fully lost it the way Rodgers looked to me last year, where it's like, if there's people around him, Rodgers doesn't want to throw. And that's the NFL. There's always people around you, which means right? And I think that's why I don't even want to be in the business of that. Because at some point, even if you have the best offensive line, even if you have the Eagles offensive line, he has to be comfortable just letting it rip because he's going to have to be in a situation of doing that. And I don't think Rodgers has that.
I don't want Rodgers around for many, many reasons, but also football, number one. Like Kyle always, I remember this when Kyle was asked about what do you want in a quarterback when it was 2017. Toughness, the ability to stand in and throw the ball when the guys are coming down on you. He mentioned it repeatedly, multiple times when he was asked, different interviews with different people. That was always what he said. Toughness, toughness, toughness. And Rodgers behind that O-line is not a good combination, let alone all the other stuff about
behind
Rodgers.
Any O-line.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's a scary thing. I don't think people realize the reason he says toughness is because you're looking downfield and you got 300 pounds coming into your face and hitting you. You have to be pretty freaking fearless to just, without thinking, be only thinking about the coverage and where the ball's got to go and throwing it.
Brisbee Life on Twitch. Shout out to the Twitch fam. Says the only hits Rodgers wants now are those shrooms out in the middle of a forest on his annual retreat. The funny outweighed the mean. I'll allow it. Thank you, Brisbee Life. Good to hear from you again. I'm not a fan of Aaron Rodgers, the human being. I'm not a fan of Aaron Rodgers.
That's a separate story, right?
I do think he threw it out there for a reason. I absolutely do. And I think it's a lot easier if you're Jed York or Parag Marathe. If you're going to say to Kyle Shanahan, we're not paying the quarterback that you love the most out of any of them that you've had on this team, if we're going to sign the guy that you were willing to go after, even after you gave up 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance, right? That's how you sell that to Kyle is, hey, we're not going to give you Brock, but we'll get you Aaron Rodgers.
Well, there's that. I think you've heard the rumor, right? There's like a rumor, and I don't know if it's true, that like Kyle's favorite quarterback ever is Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, I've heard something to that extent. Now, I don't think that matters because, like you said, his favorite quarterback on the 49ers is Brock Purdy. And I think that's fairly irrelevant to the conversation. It's more the idea of like he's been infatuated with an all-time great player. And we know that Kyle can get a little in awe of beholden to all-time great players, right? Even if they've lost it. Debo is an example of that the last couple years where he's kind of beholden to who Debo was, when all of us were saying that's not who he is.
Again and again and again.
So I maybe that's a factor with Rodgers. I doubt it. I don't even think Rodgers is really in the conversation for them. I think Mac Jones was the insurance if something goes alarming with Brock Purdy, and that's about it, right? But it's still fun to talk about, isn't it? Rodgers is never out of the conversation.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think that's the way certainly that, certain people look at it when they talk about negotiations. For example, excuse me, Listen to this is Matt Mayoko on KNBR talking about the 49ers quarterback situation.
I can't imagine that there's been any negativity at all, such as we're not going to pay Brock Purdy $61 million a year because he's not capable of doing this or that. I don't think there's been any of that. I think the 49ers are all on the same page. They want Brock Purdy around, but maybe the people who are in charge of the finances and looking at the salary cap and piecing together the 3-year plan for the roster, they're probably looking at it as, any $1 million or $2 million we can save off of this contract goes toward other players that can help build that team and keep the team competitive, or I should say return the team to being competitive.
That's Parag. That's what he's saying. Kyle wants him. John Lynch wants him. The football people want him. The bean counters don't. That's what Matt Mayoko just said there.
100%, pretty much. Now, the question is here's the question though, right? Because they do regret some of these larger contracts, not maybe giving the player the contract, but the price of it, right? Because of this sort of feeling that the coach and GM, hey, we like the player, we want to pay the player. When you maybe look at the market, the player's not that top level of the market, but you're paying him anyway because that's what it is. Is that this situation? Because that's the public conversation with Brock Purdy, right? And it looks like the 49ers are having that conversation, but it's coach and GM saying, we have to pay him. We like him. He's our quarterback. This is our guy. Let's pay him. And finance saying, hey, like $60 million is Patrick Mahomes. This is Brock Purdy. Like we've got to put a number on this. Where do you stand looking at this like that? Because on one hand, right, you should be listening to your football people. You should be paying your players. That's the business. That's how you build a good NFL team. But on the other hand, if there's one issue with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, it's sometimes they are irresponsible with who they pay and the kind of contracts they give these people. Where do you stand on that?
The way I stand on that is this. It is not Parag Marate's job to make football decisions, and it's not Parag Marate's job to decide how much money to pay certain players. The market decides how much money to pay certain players, right? Brock Purdy's not going to get a deal worth $70 million a year, just like he's not going to get a deal worth $40 million a year, because that's not what the market is. It's Parag Marate's job to fit the market cost of the player into the salary cap and the financial structure that the 49ers have. That's his job. It's not his job to say we can't pay Brock Purdy $55 million a year. It's his job to figure out how to pay Brock Purdy $55 million a year while still giving the team salary cap flexibility to do other things. But that's not how Parag Marate views his job, or how Jed York views Parag Marate's job. According to that article by Mike
I see.
Parag is going to be the one making the decisions, and that sucks for the team and for us as fans.
So you're basically saying, okay, if the market says he's 55 and the coaches want to pay him, but he's not that kind of guy, be like Jalen Hurts. Find a way to get him that 55, but in a way that the contract actually makes sense. And I agree with that, because at the end of the day, that's how you build the best possible football team. Because I don't think that you can do the drastic decisions of like, oh, yeah, we have a pretty good quarterback, but he's just pretty good, so let's not pay him and let's go back into the crapshoot of trying to find a quarterback, hoping that eventually 100 years from now the dart will stick on the board and we'll get one of the Mahomes, the Mannings, the Bradys, right? Like, that's not good business in the NFL. That's not a comprehensible way to consistently try building a contender. So if you have a pretty good quarterback, how do you contend with that pretty good quarterback? By playing to his strengths. And I agree with you. Okay, we have to pay him 55 because that's the market. Let's pay him 55 in a way that we can still win with that sort of guy. And how do you do that? Well, the Eagles just showed you an example of that, because I don't think that guy's really that good.
I would agree with what you said, especially the end thing there. I'm not a real Jalen Hurts fan. Really, what we're talking about, though, is like the structure of the organization, right? Like, as I said with Parag, it's his job to make the numbers work. It's John Lynch. Really, it's No, I shouldn't say John Lynch in this case. It's the general manager's job, really, to decide, should we pay this guy? Should we not pay this guy? Given the how we construct a roster and all that. It's the head coach's job to take the guys that they did decide to pay and make the best possible team on the field. That's really how things are supposed to be structured and organized within a functional organization.
By definition, right? Like
Yes.
if you write the rules to the title. Now, the 49ers aren't exactly that because the coach has more control of the 53.
Right. So that's the problem, because Kyle, as a coach, and I think really Kyle is a coach first and foremost, like you said, can get a little irresponsible with, hey, we really need this guy, even though in the modern NFL, it might not be the wisest decision to pay this guy at this number, given what the market is. He doesn't really factor that in because he's a coach first and foremost. And I think that can get the 49ers, and as you have pointed out, has gotten the 49ers into a little bit of trouble at times. So because the structure of the organization, in my mind, is not fundamentally sound, you run into issues like this.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm sorry, I saw this question as it came in, so
You were reading
I
the super
kind of
chat
shifted.
as I was
Yeah,
talking. You were
yeah.
reading this. You know what, Vish? We had a nice dinner in Chicago. We met face to face. Finally, I gave you a big hug when I saw you, which caught you off guard. I don't care.
I know. I didn't realize you were a hugger. I'm more of a handshaker.
We had a nice conversation. We had a couple drinks. It was beautiful. Now
we had the show.
We do a show, and you're not even listening to me.
Well, I was listening to you. I was multitasking.
Right.
Dazza kind of segued to the next part of the conversation.
Well, Dazza, thank you for the super chat. That's very generous of you. Shout out to you as a YouTube channel member and all our YouTube channel members. It's over 100 of you. We greatly appreciate you. If you want to become one, please sign up. It's less than $3 a month. Daza says, hasn't the market adjusted downwards with Darnold and Geno's contracts? Do teams really want to pay $55 million a year plus after looking at how it's worked out with the Jags, Dolphins, and Cowboys? Okay, but I could say, how's it worked out for the Chiefs and Bills? Pretty good, right? Like, so you could go on both sides.
I also don't agree with the point that the market is adjusted. Like, I look at Darnold, Geno, Baker. Like, these are kind of like considered reclamation projects because they didn't make it happen with their first team. They had to go somewhere else and then they were signed. So that's why they're paid that sort of market adjusted dollar. Brock doesn't really fit with those guys. Brock's conversation is Tua and Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence, guys who got the extension from the team that drafted him, guys that started for a team and then got an extension from that team. It's a very different conversation when it comes to franchise style quarterback and that style of conversation, I would say, because Brock isn't viewed as a guy who's failed yet. Baker was viewed as a guy who failed. Darnold was viewed as a guy who failed. Geno was viewed as a guy who failed. Rightfully or wrongfully, that perception does pay into your dollar.
Well, but people are trying to say Brock Purdy did fail because they went 6-11 last year. That's exactly what they're trying to say, and that's
that's not the same, right?
I do.
And right.
Chris
Like
has
I mean,
talked about it.
Right? Yeah.
Chris talked about it on today's PFT Live. Actually, if you were watching Pro Football Talk Live, you actually saw a clip from this podcast air on Pro Football Talk Live when they started talking about the 49ers. That was a fun little thing I noticed this morning. But
no way.
Yeah, they used the clip from my interview with Florio. But
look at that. Did they shout you out?
Well, they did. They gave me a nice little credit on the screen. I appreciated that. And they did shout me out. But Chris said it today, and he said it in the past. Look, Brock Purdy, 6-11 without the Avengers around him. He failed. They're trying to use that as a way to tie him into those lower quarterback contracts like Baker, like Geno, and Darnold and those type of guys, which I don't think is really fair, to be honest with you, because while he didn't have his best season last year, he had a damn good season before that and has done things that Trevor and Tua and Dak has never even come close to doing. You read the comment again, didn't you? You read Daz's comment.
No, I actually read the comment after.
The
comment after is a very clever comment.
Daza says, and how's it worked out for the Jags, Dolphins, Cowboys with a $55 million quarterback? Brock is not Allen or Mahomes and never will be. Yeah, but here's the thing. And the Eagles illustrated this perfectly. The Eagles are paying Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dickinson and Mailata and Lane Johnson and now Cam Jurgens at $17 million a year. So this idea that you can't sign your quarterback to a contract that's, top 10 and have good players around you is just not true. It's not true. Okay. It's just not. And like people keep mentioning that. Yeah. Are there teams that pay their quarterback $55 million and suck? Yup. But it's not the quarterback. It's not just because they paid the quarterback. It's because the other parts of the organization also suck.
I love that example because I feel like the NFL comes in waves, right? Like everybody wins in a similar way until somebody breaks the mold and shows you, no, we can actually win this way. And the Eagles were an example of this, right? Because conventional wisdom in the NFL is if you have that bad quarterback contract, we blame everything else on the roster on that bad quarterback contract. No. Even if we did all of these bad things in the draft, whatever, nope. The issue is that we're paying that guy who might actually be the best player on our team this much amount of money. Well, the Eagles showed you, no. Okay, you have to pay this guy that much amount of money. Well, that's your quarterback. Yes, he might be only number 10 or 12 ranked in the NFL, but it's more valuable to have 10 or 12 ranked number 10 or 12 ranked quarterback and then be good at finding these other ranked rosters than have to find this number 10 to 12 ranked quarterback. It's really hard to find this guy. And they made the right decisions at other roster spots. And I love that you went there because once you get the quarterback contract done, the real question is, did you spend the rest of the money properly? Okay, let's take Brock aside. Let's look at these other contracts. Are these good contracts? Are these appropriate market value for these guys? And you nailed the few contracts that the Eagles have given out that were excellent similarly. And I would expect that would be the expectation if you pay this quarterback. And I love that you're reversing the conversation because I think it's so easy to get caught into, should you pay the quarterback? And then once you pay the quarterback, that's the binary of good or bad and everything relates to that. But that's not really the case. You can pay the quarterback. The quarterback can be good to a certain extent, but there's still other things you can do to still be good enough to win a Super Bowl.
Here's the
Great points, Rob.
Once in a while, I make a couple good ones. Here's the reality of the situation. Once you pay your quarterback, is it harder to win? Sure, it's harder to win. You want to know why? Because it puts even more stress on your drafts and how good you can draft. And what have the Eagles done incredibly well in recent years? Draft. If you pay your quarterback, you have to be even better at your drafts because that's your cheap labor. And the Eagles have done that. And there's no reason the 49ers can't do that.
Not just draft, Rob. The flipping of assets, right?
Yes.
When Milton Williams leaves, they're able to have a guy to replace him, being able to draft Jalen Carter, getting that sort of pick to replace Fletcher Cox the year after you go to the Super Bowl. The way they're able to use these assets and move them around along with the drafting, it's textbook. And then the money, right? The spending of Jeffrey Lurie, the guaranteed money they're willing to give out to be able to finagle the salary cap and the contracts. It's all of it. It's all of it put together, to your point.
And when they sign these guys, they sign them right quick and in a hurry. They don't screw around. And if they decide they can't sign them right quick and in a hurry, they get rid of them. They don't
replace them.
Yes, they don't exist in this purgatory of crap that the 49ers have existed in. Daza, again, thank you for the super chat, says the Eagles aren't paying $30 million to a defensive end. Also, Hurts was amazing in 2 Super Bowls. Brock was just okay. Nick Bosa was amazing in 2 Super Bowls. Like it's not. There's always moving the goalposts, right? You can't pay a quarterback and be good. Well, the Eagles can't. Well, yeah, but the Eagles are paying $30 million.
The Eagles paid Carson Wentz, and they were able to flip it around and go to a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts.
Right? Like you can pay these guys and be good. You just have to do the other parts well. Like, damn, man. Brock Purdy left the field every time in the fourth quarter and overtime, and his team had the lead, okay? Was he perfect in the Super Bowl? No. Was he the biggest reason they didn't win the Super Bowl? Also, no. I
don't like being this guy, but the second Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl, Hurts was really excellent. He made the one mistake. I don't really put it on him because I really thought he was excellent. The second one for me, Rob,
it was different. They were set up more to score in the second one. Fangio's defense did a tremendous job. the pick six that Cooper DeJean gets makes it 17-0 and really kind of puts the game, tilts the game.
It's way out of hand, right? And it's the sort of game that if you take the Super Bowl out of it and said that was Thursday game, or excuse me, an afternoon Sunday game in October, you would just say, yeah, the Eagles blew him out, and Jalen Hurts had great stats, but he was fine. The Eagles blew him out as a team. But now that you put the Super Bowl around it, you put certain narratives, the way you want to sell the game, you want to put the guy over the top and all of it. I thought it was a little overdressed, but I get it. It's I don't want to turn this. He had a good game.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into like let's crap on Jalen Hurts Super Bowl. That's not the point.
No, he had a good game, right?
Yeah, it was fine. My point was like, let's just not say, well, you can't pay a quarterback $55 million, and then I say, oh, the Eagles do it, and they say, well, yeah, but, and then they move it on to something else. So it's like, well, which is it? You got to make up your mind with the argument. Was my only point in bringing up the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. And Benali mentions they also had really good field position on multiple drives. Yes, that is also true. So anyway, the Mike Silver stuff came out. Infuriating, as always. John Lynch, before we go, Vish has a press conference tomorrow, annual pre-draft press conference. I would love it if John Lynch was asked about the Eagles. Hey, John, your biggest competition in the NFC and the Super Bowl champs, bang out these contracts easily all throughout the offseason, beginning in the offseason, before the draft. Why can't you? Why is it? When are you going to admit that it's your fault? Not your fault, meaning the 49ers' fault. I would love for him to be asked, why can't the 49ers do it if the Eagles can?
I think his answer would be super telling to a question like that. If he goes to, we have great guys like Jed. He's always willing to cut the check. If he goes to complimenting it, then you know what the problem is. That they have to coerce these guys to cut the check, and that's what John Lynch is doing. He's publicly smart enough then to peeve off the guy who he needs to spend all his time convincing to cut the check, especially if he's as sensitive as he comes across. But if he says, negotiations are hard, things go back and forth and all that, then maybe, hey, John Lynch plays a part in these guys not getting paid.
I don't think it's John.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I do think there's that second element of they've been irresponsible with their spending and all of that. And I don't think, like you said, I think that's the issue of the people who are trying to cut in front of this. Like, they don't do their jobs in the forefront well enough. Like, they were beholden to Shanahan and John Lynch because they're not good at their jobs. And now they're like, oh, we didn't do our jobs and you guys aren't perfect, so now we're going to critique you for being perfect. But the reality is, if you were always consistent at your jobs, you would have been able to check them for their imperfections, because that's why an organization has all of these different people doing these different roles.
Checks and balances. It has gotten out of whack in more than one areas of our current life. Before we go, Cynthia, thanks for the super chat, YouTube channel member. Good to hear from you, Cynthia. Says, Brock, a good second-tier quarterback and save the 49ers' ass. Pay a market rate with a K with outs. Couple of things. People have said have talked about like, oh, Brock Purdy saved the 49ers, as if Brock Purdy also hasn't benefited for they don't work against each other, right? Yes, it's great for the 49ers that Brock worked out, but also part of the reason Brock has worked out is because of the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan and the Avengers and all of that. They don't work against each other. It's not like Kyle was purposely trying to tank and Brock Purdy overcame these terrible game plans to be successful. No, they had Brock. They put him in a position to succeed, and he succeeded.
Yeah, they worked with each other. And to be fair, the 49ers were always putting themselves in position to have an insurance policy for Trey Lance. Now, Brock Purdy benefited them in the sense that they no longer had to seek it out. They found a long-term answer at quarterback, which is a completely different thing from an insurance policy. But they were always ready for the case. It's almost like they were always expecting the case that Trey Lance, something went wrong. So
we'll see if they found a long-term quarterback or not, right? If they don't re-sign him, they didn't find a they just found an insurance policy.
You're right.
Figure out which one Brock Purdy is. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Vish, thank you as always. Look forward to our conversations every single week. It was great to meet you and actually sit down, break bread together, have a couple old fashions as we did. We didn't
We
get a
did.
picture, which I can't believe. I feel like an idiot, and I apologize for that because I wanted to throw that out there for everybody. But I swear to God,
It's okay, Rob. Next time. I will tell the people you're taller in person. Rob is actually 5'10". It's verified.
Vish told me two things. He said, number one, you're taller than I thought you would be, and number two, you look way better on camera than you do in person.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said that. Oh, you know what? It sounds better when you say it that way.
Okay, exactly. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.